Anthony Albanese has reaffirmed Australia would consider an Australian troop contribution to a coalition of the willing peacekeeping presence in Ukraine if a request were made. It's after the Prime Minister attended a virtual meeting about Ukraine consisting of Western allies except the US. Joining me live is international lawyer and defence analyst Dr Glenn Kolomeitz. Glenn, thanks so much for your time. This whole argument about whether Australia should send a peacekeeping force or not, we'll get to that, but we actually have to get to a ceasefire in the first place. What is your view that Russia will actually agree to something that will stop the fighting? Because President Trump is pretty confident that he can get Vladimir Putin on side.
Kenny, history is very telling here. The starting point is that without peace, there can be no keeping. And Putin, unless Putin addresses, or unless his root causes of the conflict are addressed, that's that NATO expansion, which they won't be, then any peacekeeping force on the ground will very quickly evolve into a kinetic conflict. So the prospects of a lasting peace are very minimal, and the prospects of a legitimate ceasefire are very minimal right now.
Yeah, because Vladimir Putin has said that, or has claimed that one of his arguments for starting the war in the first place was NATO's expansion towards the east, and this idea of sending a Western coalition of the willing peacekeeping force. Wouldn't Russia just view that the same as NATO in Ukraine?
Putin won't tolerate NATO boots on the ground. He's suggested a couple of countries in the BRIC relationship, so countries that he's aligned with. But look, he won't tolerate NATO on the ground. That would look like a NATO expansion. And you're quite right. It's a NATO expansion which goes to the heart of Putin's root causes behind this conflict. So, look, he won't tolerate that. And quite frankly, there's very little leverage over him to force him to tolerate that.
What's your view on Australia possibly sending troops if we do end up getting to that point?
But like I say, there will be no peace to keep. So the Prime Minister needs to be fully prepared to have Australian troops involved in kinetic warfare very quickly, because NATO won't accede to Putin's demands regarding pushing NATO infrastructure back to the 1997 lines, so quite a way back into Western Europe. Albanese has to be prepared for ground combat if we're going to commit so-called peacekeeping forces.